I call this talk Know Thyself because it's fun. Hopefully I'll get to why in a little bit. A little bit about me, really quickly. I'm Enreso Ramerez. These are all the things that I do. Unfortunately, I don't handle my time well, so I do lots of different things. I'm down at University of California, San Diego, where I do some fun stuff at CalIT2 and the Center for Wireless and Population Health Systems. Some of you know or have heard of this weird, cool guy named Larry Smarr, who's done a lot of microbiome sequencing. I get to work with him on a really fun project where we're trying to envision the future of health and healthcare and health visualizations. And then in my spare time, when I'm not working on my PhD down at UCSD, I'm the community organizer for Quantified Self. So before I get into Quantified Self and how fun and awesome and exciting it is, who here has been to a Quantified Self meetup here in the Bay Area or somewhere else? Awesome. Dude. Awesome. Who here's given a Quantified Self talk? Well, I know you have. Okay, so Quantified Self, just to give you a really brief background, and I'm going to go probably pretty fast so I can answer any questions you have. It was started back in 2008 by Kevin Kelly and Gary Wolf. They were sitting around thinking about what's the next thing. They saw computers were getting much more personal than just the laptops and smartphones that we were carrying around. Computing was actually getting really, really close to the body. Really trying to understand how computing was affecting people's lives. They came up with the idea of Quantified Self. They held a meetup in Kevin Kelly's apartment, or home, I believe. About 30 people showed up. And since then, since 2008, it's really grown into a global collaboration of what we call the makers and users of self-tracking tools and technologies. At the moment, we have a little over 75 meetups around the world. We're in, I think, 16 different countries now because Athens just started. We have 12,000 members on Meetup that are going, or at least saying they're going to go to some of these meetups around the world. I think there was actually one today in Dallas. So wherever you are in your travels, you can probably find a Quantified Self meetup close by. So what happens at these different meetups? Well, they really focus on what we call our show and tell experience, which is where people come and answer our 3 prime questions, which is in their self-tracking and their self-experimentation. We really boil things down to a very simple modification of the scientific method, which is what did you do, how did you do it, and what did you learn? And really by just priming people with those 3 simple questions, we're able to get a great deal of information about what people are doing in their own lives, how they're using technology, both old and new, to understand who they are and how the world works with them. So we catalog almost all of those videos when people actually videotape those talks. So right now, if you go to that link, you can watch 394 different videos about people cataloging different things about their life. People talking about very simple things about their physical activity and dietary patterns and how they're trying to lose weight, to people talking about how they track their memory. There's a great talk on there that we actually had again at our conference a year ago by a gentleman here that lives in San Francisco that talked about keeping track of all of his unique thoughts over the last, I believe it's 15 years. He wrote a DOS program in like 1987 or so, and he continues to use it to this day. It's called Memex. It's at memex.mx, I believe, and really, really interesting talk. So people come and talk about all sorts of different things that they can track. If you can think of something that you want to track, I guarantee you there's someone that's probably talked about it already, and you can find it up there on the website. Or up on the Vimeo website, because there's just so many of them up there. Anyway, we also catalog everything at quantifiedself.com. You can go and look about that kind of stuff all there as well. So I guess rather than like talking about what Quantified Self as an organization is, I keep getting asked, like, why do people do this? Like, why do people come from all over the place to come and talk to people? Why do they put on devices? Why are they strapping things on their heads when they go to sleep at night? Well, why have I been wearing a Fitbit for over 2 years? And it was during a conversation in Amsterdam when we had our first European conference with an artist who uses Quantified Self and self-tracking tools and technologies and that data that she gathers to create her art. She's a wonderful artist. Her name is Lori Frick. Highly recommend you look her up. And we were talking about, why is this so attractive to people? Why are we seeing this kind of growth? And in that talk, we kind of came up with this idea that people ask themselves 2 fundamental questions about knowing themselves. And one is, why am I here? And that's a really tough question, and I don't really want to get into that because it can get into some very tricky religious type things that I don't want to talk about. But this is the better question, I think, and I think it's somewhat more easily answered, which is the who am I? And I think this is at the fundamental core of why people engage in this practice of self-tracking and self-experimentation, and why people are really gravitating toward it as technologies improve and allow us to do this self-tracking and self-experimentation a lot easier. So, slide's all screwed up, but that's okay. So you can see that we have tools now to measure everything from our steps, like I mentioned, our Fitbit. We have our heart rate, we have our cell phones now. People are developing just mind-boggling things using our mobile phones, using our smartphones that are allowing us to understand when and how we're feeling sad. So there's a great little startup in Boston called Ginger.io that uses context awareness, pulls a lot of data from, I believe, only Android phones right now, and they use some really great machine learning techniques to process that data, such as location, the frequency and content of text messages, to understand mental patterns and mental health. And they're partnering with a bunch of different hospitals and research teams to try and actually create that, make that technology a little bit easier to use. So the reason, I think, one of the reasons why this is becoming so much easier is because we're getting into a time now where we have real information, which is real objective information about who we are, what we do in real time. And this is becoming much easier as our sensor technologies and our machine learning and algorithmic technologies start to improve. And the great thing about this real objective information in real time is it's not just other people collecting information on us, which it historically has been in the past. It's becoming much more of our own information. Through a lot of these different devices, a lot of these different technologies, we're seeing a proliferation of APIs, or application programming interfaces, that allow users to actually grab and make use of their own data however they would see fit. This is a point of contention for a lot of people in QS. We definitely want to own our own data. A lot of the people that are making these tools want to own the data and then let us have just bits and pieces of it. If you are in the tool maker section, I highly encourage you to let your users own their own information. But it also, with that access, when people are actually given access to their own data, whether it's in real time or not real time, what it does open up is the ability for them to look into that information and start to experiment. Because they're trying to understand who they are, they can start to look at what changes might be possible to become the people they would want to be in the world. And that's pretty enlightening. And in a talk, I was talking to an undergrad at Boston University the other day. She's a science journalism major. And during the conversation, she asked me if we were rewriting what it means to do science. And I think that's somewhat the case, but I also almost want to disagree with her, because what Quantified Self is doing, it's not rewriting science. And we get into a lot of issues with scientists over what it means to do self-tracking and self-experimentation, mainly because the sample size is low, it's 1. And I don't think we're rewriting science. It's mostly because science at its fundamental core has always been an N-of-1 practice. Most great things that we have in our life are because people were willing to do some sort of self-experimentation. And in another conversation with a QS enthusiast, she actually helps run the Quantified Self Meetup in Pittsburgh. Her name is Ann Wright. She used to work at NASA Ames. She used Quantified Self tools and self-tracking to self-diagnose herself with a nightshade allergy that was just completely wrecking her life. Really interesting woman. We were talking about this kind of concept, about Quantified Self, about science. And she said, you know, the crazy thing about QS is that people argue with it because they think it should reflect what science is, and that's the big S in science. But what Quantified Self really is, and what we are all doing and what we see a great future in, is the little s science. And little s science is really about the method. It's not about the machine that is science. It's not about the big NIH grants or getting stuff from NSF or the research publications or getting your name out there or getting published in a journal or in the New York Times. It's about the method, about having a question, having a hypothesis, having some sort of tool, looking at some data, collecting that information, analyzing it in some way that makes sense to you, and then figuring out a conclusion or finding a conclusion that matters to your individual life. Again, we go back to this idea that N of 1 is supremely powerful. So yeah, the method, that's what we're really all about. And I think that's why Quantified Self is so captivating and why we see so many people gravitating towards it, and why, as community organizer, I'm answering emails, almost every week where someone is saying, I want to start one of these meetups in my area. It's because people are gravitating towards learning and proliferating the method of doing science in a way that's important to them because it's about them. So I have to give credit here to a great, probably not well-known behaviorist named, not really a behaviorist, he was a behavioral psychologist named Neuer. He wrote a series of articles, 2 articles, both on self-experimentation in the early 80s. And I was rereading them this morning, and every time I read them, I find bits and pieces that are just, it's like he foresaw the future of what quantified self could be. He wrote, the solution to our problem is not a pill, not some product, but rather a continuous process of discovery and change. And that's really what I think we are doing at the core of Quantified Self, is we're using the lens of technology through these different meetups to help people develop their own methods to understand how they change in the world. And I think that's supremely powerful. And the great thing about these meetups is, and the great thing about all this stuff is that in difference than big S science, which being an academic in part of my life, it's really actually hard to share what we do. When you practice the methods and you practice them on a personal scale, it's actually quite easy to share what you do. And for some reason, people just want to share what it is that they're doing. They want to share their methods. They want to share what they're learning. They want to share the knowledge that they're creating for their own lives. And it's not a, let me share with you how the world works. It's let me share with you how the world is working for me, because maybe this might inspire you to do your own self-experiment or to try this method in your own life. Maybe it might work for you. He actually, like I said, this guy kind of foretold the future. He wrote in this article in 1981, oddly enough in the time that I was born, that self-experimentation increases significant interactions with others. That when you do these things that you can't help, because we're curious beings, we want to I think, help others, that when we create some sort of new knowledge, we have this innate desire to share that new knowledge. And he writes that, that this isn't about people telling others what they ought to do, but just telling them what worked for them. So, and the crazy thing about this sharing thing, it's not just happening in these meetups, it's happening all over the world. Who here has heard of the OpenSnip project? Okay, a few people. Who here has data up on OpenSnip? Okay, I do. That's my data right there. OpenSnip is a great project born out of Germany. Some great master's and PhD students decided that when people get their genomes tested through these commercially available genetic tests like 23andMe, that's great, and they're learning a lot about themselves. But if that data was open and available, we could learn a lot more, especially if people put in their phenotypes. And so what they do is they allow for people to put up their genetic data. Like I said, my data is up there. You can go and look at it right now. It's under a Creative Commons 0 license. Their terms of service are amazingly written. They basically say, if you're scared about this, just don't do it. And this could possibly be used to harm you. We have no clue what's going to happen in the world. The great thing, so yeah, they're fantastic people. They're awesome. I've had a chance to talk to a bunch of them. So there's 304 people right now. If you are interested in genetics and you just want to play around with people's genetic data, 304 people. You can actually download all of their 23andMe, I think, is their most common profiles that are up there. They also just added a Fitbit connector, so you can download 16 people's Fitbit. I was number 2 because I learned about it late. But other people are doing this too. They're putting up their own data. Some for curiosity, some because they just want to see what other people can find and what they might be able to see in the information that's about their lives. There's a great blog from a guy named Kostas Arenberg, who's in New York. His name's blogs under the Measured Me handle. He puts his data up online. There's another gentleman who actually, if you guys are familiar with the Netflix prize, the $1 million algorithm to predict movies, one of the gentlemen that was on the prize-winning team has a My Year Data project, although his data is a bit stale. I think it hasn't been updated in about 3 or 4 months. So people are doing this. It's great, and I think this is the way the world's going to work, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. I think what's really interesting is that it's not just this kind of I don't want to say it's silly data. I mean, steps and weight is important and things like that, but what about the data about ourselves that is really, really personal? This is a gentleman in Italy named Salvatore, I believe it's Ionesca. I probably just completely butchered his name, but I'm not good in Italian. Diagnosed with brain cancer. He's a TED fellow. He works as an artist and an open source evangelist. And what he decided to do when he was diagnosed with brain cancer is put up every single piece of his medical data online, openly available. He's calling it an open source cure. Cure being not just finding a cure for cancer, but cure in a very meta sense. I think on the website he calls it, a place for a spiritual and transformative cure. That anyone is open and available to download the data and do whatever it is they want. You want to make a pretty picture, you want to make a data visualization, you just want to write them an article that says, hey, I found something in your DICOM data, or I knew how to read your MRI, and this is what I saw. You can do that. That's open and available. All that you can download at that website there. And again, we see the same stuff at these QS meetups, that people are sharing some really intimate things about their lives. We had a gentleman gave a really inspiring talk about his struggles with panic disorder and trying to track panic disorder and how different things triggered his panic attacks and what he used to actually try and cure himself of these panic disorders. And, we see a lot of health talks, which is great. Health is probably one of the most common things that we are all interested in. We want to lead healthier and longer lives. But yeah, I think it's all interesting. And so what about, I guess, the future? This is kind of what we're thinking about here, is what is this going to mean in the future? And I've heard a bunch of people talk about this, and I ran into something really interesting, this concept of a codex vitae, from a friend of mine, Buster Benson, who helped start the Quantified Self up in Seattle. He is a great developer, has worked in Quantified Self tools in a long time. And he ran into this in a book he was reading. It basically had the idea that at the end of your life, you would have some sort of codex, a manual, a book, something that you could list all of the things that you've ever learned, ever done, so that the generations after you could benefit from the things that you've learned in your life. And I think we're moving towards that place. And during our conference just in May of this year, we had an anthropologist say that we might be moving into what might be a new kind of anthropology, and I think it might even be a new kind of biography or autobiography, if you will. And with the tools that are being proliferated right now, and the way I think the technology is moving, is we are moving towards a time in the next, I don't want to put a number on it, but something in the foreseeable future, where someone will be born, and everything about their life, their actions, who they talk to, who they communicate with, will be tracked. That will be data that will be collected, and their biography, their anthropology will be written in real time for them, and then be collected and could be used possibly in the future after that person passes. And hopefully along that time, that person's able to actually interact with their own data and work with it in order to learn something about themselves. And those learnings could be put into some type of codex so that people could understand what this person learned and how that data that they were collecting about their life transformed who they were. So I think that's where we're working on. What we're working on with Quantified Self is really trying to help people understand this concept of who I am. From a futurist movement, I guess, from someone who sits a little bit outside the box here, I think it's really hard to understand where we're going without understanding who we are in the present. And what we're doing with Quantified Self is trying to understand who we are at the moment. So yeah, thanks.
Do we have any time for a quick
Yes.
question?
Just 1 minute.
1 minute.
1 minute.
Who's got the question? Oh,
Or
you're
stretch.
yawning, or?
No, I'm asking.
Yeah.
So one thing I heard come out of QoS was that people surprisingly found butter made them smarter. Like there's an optimal amount of butter apparently. Have there been any really cool findings? I'm very curious about things that have been shown to increase mindfulness for lots of people, not just for like a few, but what are the most surprising discoveries about wellness and mindfulness?
One of the interesting findings was a gentleman gave a talk about using, doing repeated studies on himself using, what was it called? I don't remember what it was called, but he used an app called Quantified Mind to try and track his cognitive performance. He actually found that butter didn't work whatsoever. From a large scale, that's one of the interesting things is, we're not really doing large scale experiments. People aren't doing lots of things together. But you mentioned the idea of things that help people become mindful. And I think from a experimental method point of view, the process of engaging in any kind of self-tracking where you develop awareness for what you are doing, whether that's how much you weigh, how much you write, who you talk to, whatever it is, by trying to live with that awareness and becoming aware of it in real time, you are developing a type of mindfulness that is very, very beneficial, especially when it surrounds something that you're really, really interested in. I think Quantified Self, even though it gets confused with being a very tech-heavy trend, at its core is really about being mindful.
A shout out about sharing genomics data. If you have children, talk to them before sharing, because half of your genomic data is theirs. And it matters to their future, to the choices that you make today about disclosing that. So.
Andrew. Yeah.
Just one point. Have you heard of the project, The Human Face of Big Data?
Yeah, I know. I've met Rick and the guys behind that. Yeah. They're doing some interesting stuff. They're doing something a little bit different than we are.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
trying to show that if big data is the future of the world, what does it mean?
Is there any way that the tools that they are using can be used with you so we can correlate information that you find from users already sharing?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to talk to Rick about using his tools, or at least getting that data. From what I understand right now, the data's not open.
I know, yeah.
I don't want to take up too much time, but
Well, that
find
was
me
1 minute.
the rest of the day.
Thank you.
you.
Is